It's our post-podcast live stream. Make sure, obviously, everyone stays tuned for the podcast that drops tomorrow. But welcome, and we encourage you to be interactive here. Ask questions. Tell us we're wrong. Tell us we're right. Don't be afraid to get in our faces during the live stream here. Right, guys, let's jump into it. Let's talk about esports and gaming.
What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week. But we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze business implications of everything happening in this industry.
The live stream's getting bigger!
I know.
Make sure you go buy William's book, The Book of Esports, which it's killing it on Amazon as always. I think everyone has it by now, but if you don't, go buy it. And even if you do, maybe go buy a second copy, you know.
Nothing says I love my mom and dad like the Book of Esports.
And on the after show, we cover all the stuff that just didn't make it into the podcast. It's still just as good. It's just as interesting. It's maybe even better because we get to interact with you guys.
Ghost Runner, I managed to fit that in with about the busiest week of work I've ever had. So anytime
priorities, right?
It's an anti-William is late device.
That's very effective.
Don't count on it though.
Risky. Hot garbage. It's an indicator of bad money management. It's an indicator of immature management.
I have some hot takes.
For the vast majority of people who game, and look, if you look at just the gaming market, the dollar in revenue, the $137 billion global gaming market, $70 billion of that is mobile. $70 billion. For those guys, this is a revolution.
Listening. Thank you for tuning in every week. Thank you for leaving those 5-star ratings and reviews. We really appreciate it.
If I was Epic, I'd be hiring some of the best talent away from Facebook, not from other game developers. I actually think they should have a fire sale, right? Sell the company at rock bottom price because it's going to zero. And I think the natural, interesting acquirer would be Apple. And they would convert them to literally Apple arcades. We want people to funnel in. We want everyone in the audience ready to go and all hyped up. That's the idea. Julian says the live stream is the best by far.
And I, for one, welcome the fact that anything that gets you to stop playing Candy Crush is good for us as a whole.
The live stream!
William and I went on a bit of a tangent.
World of Warcraft drops, yeah.
A little bit of a tangent. This is the first interesting thing I've seen from a competitive level to what Twitch is doing. I mean, let's start with a big story. It's impossible to ignore big numbers.
From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fact fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
Hi, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the prophet, William as the professor.
From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports after show live stream. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, and this cast seems to get bigger and bigger every week. My friends and co-hosts, William Collis, Lindsay Poss, Jeff Cohen, Victoria Taylor, all of you guys, welcome. For those of you who are new to the after show, welcome to the official after show of esports. What we do here is we cover all the stuff that didn't make it into the podcast, all the stuff, all the articles, all the great news, all the topics, discussion, all the business of esports, but just everything that we couldn't fit into the 1 hour podcast that we do every week. We still cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week. We still look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens, but it's just the stuff that didn't make it into the podcast. And the best part is you guys get to participate. You get to be a part of the show. You get to ask us questions, challenge us. This is what makes the live stream special and why we love doing it week after week and why we love having you here. So welcome. If you're new here, welcome. Get involved. Ask questions. If you're a regular, and tell your friends about the live stream. You spread the word. This is how we continue to grow this, and we appreciate it every time you guys do. Guys, welcome. Hang on. Let me see if this is this better? Is this too
yeah, I like better.
Yeah. Or is this better?
No,
what do we like better? I think this works. All right, even though it's just like my face here. William, you're always once. William, always once.
I was
muted.
So many fun things. I was saying we're only 4 people away from full Brady Bunch. Like that's our goal.
We should play Hollywood Squares. That's what I want to do.
That would be fun. And I've been practicing pointing at the right person. Reversed on your
just
camera.
to mix you up, William, I'm just going to start.
I was just going to say
around.
top right.
Oh no, I've got it. I know how it works. I've learned how to mirror my motions. You can't trick me. Watch this. Pointing at Lindsay.
Oh wow, this is
Nailed it.
He's a pro. Martin says quite the group today. Yes, Martin, and I think the more the merrier. Victoria, for those of you who don't know, who are tuned in for the first time, Victoria, I can let you tell them about yourself, but she is a professor of esports marketing. And so we have technically, I guess, 3 professors on the show today.
I was just going to say, I mean, that professor nickname is gone, right? That's out of the mix, but I can be number 3. That works too.
There you go. But
it's
so
too much academia on here, man. This is too much. I don't know.
You think this has just become too much, Jeff? It's out of control.
Just too much. Too much academia. That is,
Yeah.
That's becoming a dad.
Too much
I've already
knowledge.
turned him into a cynic.
That's true. It's the lack of sleep.
Congratulations to Jeff, who had his baby. Who will add to the cast? I guess. Well, we have to, right?
Why not? We had Bradley, the bulldog, on, so why not Jack, the person?
I love the idea. Before we jump into topics this week, guys, I do want to give a little bit of a sneak peek at what we covered on the podcast this week. Let me just point out some of the articles that we covered and some of the topics. So we talked about Call of Duty's dominance in the gaming industry. Very interesting discussion on if we thought anyone else could do a Call of Duty style success story. And what's really interesting here is Call of Duty has been the top of the bestseller list for pretty much the last 13 years. So really interesting phenomenon there. We talked about Bilibili Esports that owns the Overwatch League team Hangzhou Spark and also a League of Legends team raising $28 million in funding, and potentially the conflict with Bilibili Esports being owned by the streaming platform Bilibili. So there was that. We talked about esports streaming numbers up almost 70% year over year and what's going on in the streaming world. And finally, we talked about PlayStation and Xbox looking at new acquisitions and tied that to a story about PlayStation reportedly losing a major exclusive this year. So they're both out shopping, rumored for acquisitions, and also rumored that PlayStation's losing this major exclusive. So that is what you have to look forward to on the podcast this week, dropping tomorrow. Happy to talk about any of these things. If you're particularly excited about any of those topics, we can always come back to them on the live stream if you want. Jeff, you're looking like maybe you did want to talk about one of them. You like the Call of Duty story, don't you?
I do, because I just love being the Activision cheerleader sometimes, because you guys, Paul particularly, you can be very hard on Activision, and it sometimes get lost just how well they execute, what they've done with a lot of the acquisitions, what they've done with Call of Duty, bringing it free to play, like bringing it to mobile too. Nobody thought that was going to work. Nobody. And it clearly has. So I just want to give them a little, not that they need it, $70 billion behemoth, but they're not so bad.
You will love this podcast because both Paul and I gushed about Activision Blizzard this week, And I should also say I am always a huge Activision Blizzard cheerleader as well.
God.
Like, just to be clear,
the bandwagoning here.
I get told to tone it down by Paul, but obviously, anyway. All right, just to set the record straight. Anyway,
to set the record straight. Look, I say all the time, my favorite game right now is still WoW. So I mean,
there you go.
Not that I'm an Activision Blizzard hater. I just think it's also sad that the two best games they make are both almost 15 years old now.
That's true.
Sad or
there is
amazing.
a double-edged sword.
But they come out with a new one every year or every other year, and they sell. So it's not like the same game.
I mean, have you played year after year Call of Duty? It's the same game.
Also,
innovation. There's no innovation in
business model. A game I sell you once and you keep paying me on for 20 years, or having to develop a new game. It's arguably better. The fact that they haven't come up with a new WoW is a good thing from a business perspective.
Look, guys, it's an interesting. We have an interesting debate about it. Tune into the podcast because it's a fascinating phenomenon. The Call of Duty phenomenon is fascinating, right? And I think we both agreed that it will probably never happen again. That to do what EA does, what Activision does with Call of Duty year after year after year is not trivial. It's really, really hard. Even if the games are very similar, it's still really hard. Neil says, "Bring back Heroes of the Storm." Neil, this is not the solution. Stop encouraging him.
No,
please.
Neil, you are exactly right. Neil and I see a lot of industry insiders are in this Heroes cabal.
Who also happen to be our friends and are feeding you softballs.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. They're just pitching it over the line. Video game you like, it should be popular.
Martin says, "I wish Call of Duty leaned completely into the live service model and stopped making sequels. Unnecessarily fragments the community." Martin, we have this discussion on the podcast, and I actually disagree with you. So, because first-person shooters, I will just say, are a different animal than a League of Legends or any of the other big live service games, even a Fortnite in some ways. Call of Duty, I think, would struggle as a live service.
Even taking a step back even further, I mean, Call of Duty is made by 3 different studios on a rotating 3-year basis. So doing it all live service would be tough. They'd either have to combine all those studios, or it would be 3 different studios essentially working on the same game. That could end up being just too many cooks in the kitchen. So there might be, some reason for that as well.
It's also the reason you buy Call of Duty year after year is bigger explosions, better graphics, more realistic guns, more immersive. If it's a live service, no one cares that League of Legends looks the same as it did 10 years ago, right? You're not playing that game for the immersive experience and the incredible graphics. First-person shooters are really very graphics driven in some ways, good ones. And it's hard to just do that as a live service. The overhaul every year in some ways is to COD's benefit.
Oh, okay, Mr. Quake has curved surfaces. Like, go back.
It's also, sorry to keep belaboring on this topic, it's a game it's hard to monetize so much in game without making it pay to win. I mean, I think in the last couple of years with the battle pass and stuff like that, they've built more of a cosmetic economy. But, it's not like Fortnite where you can just throw random things in the game and it kind of works because it's so cartoony. Like there's only so much you can sell without it start becoming pay to win. So if they move from a boxed copy model to fully live service, they're going to have to make up like $1 billion and a half in revenue. There's only so much that they can kind of sell in game without it starting to feel either pay to win or just ridiculous, where it's like you're walking around World War II and you're holding like a banana or something. Like it just doesn't, make sense. So,
Jeff, it's interesting you say that because we also talk about that. And William, I'm just going to tease it. William has a great point on the monetization of Call of Duty versus other games. And you are right. It is more difficult. So without giving too much away, that is what you have in store for tomorrow. For our first story today, guys, it's a really big one, I think, because it has to do with a public esports company, a very well-known public esports company. And the article here is from sportsvideo.org. And the headline is Allied Esports sells World Poker Tour, will explore sale of esports business. So fundamentally what happened is Allied Esports had really two businesses. They own the World Poker Tour and they have their, tournament and what do you call stadium business, right? Physical location business where people go to compete, including the big HyperX Arena in Las Vegas. And they've now sold the World Poker Tour for $78 million. And they're considering the sale of their entire esports business, price unknown. And basically what they want to do is turn into a SPAC. So essentially a public vehicle that just has cash that will go out and look to buy companies or assets in the online entertainment space. It says including but not limited to real money gaming and other gaming sectors, and essentially gambling, focused on gambling. It's huge news because Allied was, again, one of the few pure play public esports companies. The best one in the space, obviously, being Esports Entertainment Group and Jeff's company. But they were another player in the space. And they've essentially sold this very valuable asset, saying they're basically going to sell all their assets and become a SPAC. I'm curious what you guys think of this. If you have any thoughts on, why would one of the most prominent names essentially shed everything that they're doing and sort of start over here?
I would be very curious to look at their balance sheet and see what their revenue is coming from, because I was under the impression that a lot of it was from the World Poker Tour. So that would indicate to me that they clearly need some type of influx of cash because that was the more successful side of their business. I'm surprised. This is big. This is big news. So I'm curious to see where this is going.
I will say I was on a panel at the Needham conference, not last year,
November 2019, because I was there.
with the CEOs of Super League Gaming and the CEO of Allied Esports. And to their faces on their panel, I said both of their businesses would probably fail. And so now I'm one for two here.
It doesn't look good.
What's interesting is they sort of want to stay in the space, right? Like they're selling some assets, but what they want to buy, like World Poker Tour, is entertainment and is real money gaming, sort of. Like, does anyone find it weird that they seem to not have faith in the assets that they have, but yet want to stay in the same sector?
I will say
it's weird.
It's incredible. I've never seen somebody return to a SPAC. Like I'm not aware that that's like normally, like I get that SPACs are kind of hot right now, but extremely hot. But like it's like that is like not the natural evolution of the butterfly. You know what I mean? Like it's like the butterfly crawling back into the cocoon. It's unusual to say the least. Because fundamentally what it sort of is saying, as I look at it, is other businesses would generate a better return on capital than the businesses that I have. That's fundamentally how I think you have to read that, right? And so the statement that they're making is we'll sell the businesses that we have and buy other businesses that will return better capital efficient like income. Is that right? Is that how to read this, or is there something strategically I'm missing here?
Victoria, you had something you were going to say.
Well, I was thinking the exact same thing as Lindsay. Like, do we have access to their financials? Like, what is going on here? It just, I feel like it was kind of a surprise. Yeah, I should have looked up their financials before we talked about this today, but it's a big one. And I know they did say that they'd be stripping esports out of their name. And I know that, the poker world was doing quite well. So it definitely raises some flags. Like, are they aware of some upcoming opportunities that like no one else is, like to be shifting out of these two spaces into the next big thing? But definitely seems like they want some cash on hand. It's just seems pretty in the dark right now what's going on.
Well, here's something that's interesting, Paul, and you, the trader, and you will instantly find this to be interesting. What did you say they sold the World Poker Tour business for?
78 million.
78 million.
Well, it's two pieces, right? There's an upfront payment and a rev share.
Yeah, so they're getting roughly 60 to 70 million in cash.
Yep.
Well, Allied Esports, the company, their whole market cap currently is 60 million. Yeah. So that means that the esports business is literally being valued at
zero.
negative $10 million currently.
Well, someone like if we were able to, right? Because it's hard in practice, it's impossible, right? We should be buying up all of the Allied stock at the exact current price, right? Because you're right, there's a definite arbitrage opportunity where the cash on hand is worth more than the entire business.
It's shocking to me. It's one of those things where I've been like, I haven't really looked into it too hard, but I'm like scratching my head. It's one of those classic, like, what did the Buffett, you learn about it in business school, the cigar butt, where it's like the company is literally trading for less than the cash on the balance sheet. Like that is supposed to be in today's day and age, like statistically impossible because these arbitrage opportunities just get basically bought away. Now there's probably something else going on there. Maybe they have some debt that I forgot about or something like that. Also, you could make an argument that the esports business is losing money, so it should be trading for liability.
That's it. That's the conclusion.
Yeah, which right? That was kind of where I was leading. I figured you would kind of get there because you are you. But that's interesting to me. Now, I don't think that should be the case, but they are burning a good amount of cash from that business, and it's pretty capital intensive. They have all these assets that they're kind of underwater on. So it's going to be interesting to see who the natural buyer is for that. I'm not really sure. And I would also echo William's point. It's super weird to have a company go from SPAC, buy a bunch of assets, re-SPAC, and then it sounds like they're trying to buy very similar-ish assets. I know Frank and Tony and the guys over there pretty well. We've worked with them. So I, wish them the best. I'm sure, Frank's a smart guy. I'll give him credit. He bought the World Poker Tour, I think, for 30 million. They just sold it for 80. So, that's not so bad. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to follow. It's not clear in my head who like the immediate buyer would be for their esports assets.
I have a funny feeling there are some great economics here for the principals in the business too, which may be driving this. The esports business being seen as a liability, I think, is not because the underlying assets are really bad. It's just, I think they didn't really figure out how to pivot during the pandemic and turn those assets into anything other than a major liability, right? Like fundamentally, anyone with a lot of like physical locations struggled. But I think they struggled more than most because their whole philosophy was not, 10 centers or 500 centers, all very cost effective. Like they were the mega, we spent 20 million on the one arena. Like those got hit hardest, arguably. And I think they never really figured out how to pivot away from that or generate, significant revenue to cover the losses. And so, you could call this bad on management, but fundamentally it sounds like, again, to your point, Jeff, with the sale of World Poker Tour at a significant profit, right? And the fact that they now have more cash on the balance sheet than the whole company's worth, they're sort of in a good spot, right? If they get anything for the esports business, right, from a shareholder value perspective, potentially they're better off than they were a week ago. Potentially.
Who I think the big winner is here? I'll say the prediction. I think that this World Poker Tour asset is worth a lot more than even this PE firm got for it. I mean, it's sort of the holy grail, right? Like it's cash flow positive. It's all online, but well, actually there's a little in person, but it's mostly online. And it's sort of the tip of the spear to get into online casino. So as online casino rolls out more in the US, I mean, this is going to be a super valuable asset. I bet either DraftKings, FanDuel, one of these like large casino online gambling companies will buy this for 150 million plus in 18 months.
Here's the real issue I have with this transaction, and I see this quite often, right? Online gaming is so hot, right? Gambling online in general, not just esports betting, is just the hottest ticket in town right now, right? And so the feeling is, okay, we got to go play there, right? Let's move to what's really hot. The problem is that space is already pretty crowded. Like, I'm not saying it's completely saturated, but it's a pretty crowded space, and they're choosing to be late to a party that's very active, right? That's really well attended, a very exciting party, but they're late to it, right? Yeah. Then be early to a party that I think has more potential long term. And this is the lack of foresight, I think, that frustrates me with this kind of thing.
So the only minor thing that I guess push back maybe isn't the right word, but they're not going to necessarily go out and build their own new assets in gambling. They're effectively going to be a SPAC. So they're going to take a company that's already entrenched, just wants the public listing, and they're going to kind of, it's like any SPAC, like when FEAC came out, they didn't like build DraftKings, they just went and bought it. So, I don't, your commentary is maybe not entirely fair, but I see what you're saying. It's like they're chasing the hot sector, which, may or may not be the right strategy.
Does it say that they want to buy a gambling company? I just missed the part. Okay, I was going to say
their cash resources to explore opportunities in online entertainment, including but not limited to real money gaming and other gaming sectors.
Interesting.
So, look, I think it's a bit backwards. The shareholders may make out okay in all this, but I think long term, Allied is not going to live up to the high expectations I think everyone had for them in the space. That's fundamentally sort of my conclusion on this.
It's unfortunate because they were one of the few companies that was actually profitable pre-pandemic. I mean, they were. I looked at their balance sheet right before you were on that. I swear I looked at their balance sheet right before Paul was on a panel with them, and their profit margin was like $1 million. It wasn't huge, but they weren't like bleeding money the way other companies were, from what I remember.
On the World Poker side, I think I don't know about. You could be. I mean, if you looked at it, you're probably right.
Yeah, this was, I guess, about 1.5 years ago. But either way, being a real estate company, they had, I thought, more of a chance at doing something with all those properties, and they had great properties.
They had the big mega hype
tour. Yeah,
they had the big mega hype properties,
kind of make it, and then they just didn't. Which is obviously a lot of it's due to the pandemic, but that's still really unfortunate.
Agreed. SJ Cryptic says, I'm only on episode 16, so I'm quite a bit behind, but I'm loving the podcast so far. SJ Cryptic, thank you. I don't know if watching them from 1 to like 150.
You're going the wrong way. You should go the opposite way.
Yeah, maybe go the opposite way. Although I love when people watch them in order because they get to see how spectacularly right I am about just about everything. Well, let's say everything. Let's have a little bit of a lighter story here. This one's going to make for an interesting conversation. This is from essentiallysports.com. The headline here is Dota 2 millionaire esports pro shows off $2.2 million mansion. Okay, so this is a Dota 2 professional, Johan Notail Sunstein, Danish player for OG. He's made more than $7 million playing Dota 2. He just spent $2.2 million on a mansion, and they made a whole video about it, that he's the world's richest esports pro, etc. There's not really a lot of like business to talk about here. The question I have for you guys is this, unless you have some other comment, but here's the specific question I have for you guys, which is, will we see in esports what we see in traditional sports, where you get these young guys making millions of dollars, right? And then as soon as they hit like 35, 40, and they haven't been, competing for 10 or 15 years, they're all broke, right? They've all spent their money on mansions and cars and this. And will we see a similar phenomenon in esports, you think, given how young, especially, a lot of these esports pros are? I'm curious.
It's a funny question. I saw the video a couple days ago.
Okay.
And he's so humble. He's walking around and he's like, so yeah, I spent this, and then I did have to furnish it, so that cost me a little bit more. Like, he wasn't flashy. Like, it was just a normal house, like obviously beautiful, but he was very humble in the video. Yeah, he was well spoken. He just said, yeah, I think I'll play for a few more years. I know I'm seen as more mature and on my way out, but I think I have a few more good years in me. And yeah, he wasn't showing off his cars. Like, it wasn't like, welcome to my crib. It was very much so just a very humble young guy.
That's interesting. That's an interesting. Do you think, though, Victoria, that we will see a similar phenomenon to traditional sports, or is this an indication to you that esports pros are just better grounded, or I don't know? Like, is there something about esports pros you think specifically that makes it that they won't fall into a similar trap to traditional sports professionals?
Yeah, I mean, as we get more data points, we'll have a better idea over time. I mean, I think young people with money in their hands, it's a recipe for disaster in a lot of cases. I think there's also people who have a really great handle on money. So, I mean, I don't think that's going to change. I think we're still going to see that same divide.
Yeah,
maybe because they could be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lindsay.
No, you're fine. I was just going to echo that. Handing 18-year-olds millions of dollars goes a lot of directions.
What do you mean? If we gave it to William, he'd spend it on Magic cards. So it doesn't not.
No. Heroes of the Storm skins. I'd have like 35,000 alt accounts that are all fully stocked.
But also, to be fair, it's not just limited to sports. I mean, it's musicians who make it when they're younger. It's actors and actresses. I mean, any kid with money can go a lot of directions.
Yeah, I think you're going to get a phenomenon in esports where, as the industry grows, you're going to get a lot of people with lots of millions of dollars, right? Inevitably, the same way, the entire NFL football team, there's no guy on there that's poor, right? They're all making really good money. You're going to see a similar phenomenon in esports where sort of all maybe the top 1,000 in the world across all the different games are all making millions of dollars, right? I'm just curious if you guys think fundamentally there's something different about the esports professional that may end up in a similar or different outcome.
You could argue that streaming may elongate some of these guys' careers, right? Like with pro sports, like you can't, continue your career once you're not good enough to play at the highest level, because there's just no entertainment element to it. Like Tom Brady's not going to have like a Twitch stream and have him throwing a football to like his kids. Whereas, clearly these guys can, even if they're not the tip top, they can keep the entertainment side of it going. So maybe that elongates their earnings a little bit. Also, I don't want to generalize about gamers, but it's a little more like STEM oriented. There's a lot, some of these games have much more of a mental aspect to it. You could argue that gives people a little bit more, financial literacy and whatnot. Maybe that's too much of a generalization, or maybe that's just a hope for the space.
Yeah,
you can argue that traditional sports give structure and collaboration and all that, but it doesn't really make a difference when it comes to spending money.
Yeah, as much as I love esports, I wouldn't privilege its competitors above traditional sports, right? I think like both are very good in terms of developing traits and discipline and dedication. And I think the thing is what you said, Jeff, which is, look, like the tail, right? Like the reason why people go bankrupt is because they have years where they earn 5 million. And then all of a sudden they stop earning, but they keep spending and they have nothing to. And then the reason why they ultimately go bankrupt is even if they downsize their lifestyle, downsizing to a zero income is still, a zero income lifestyle. But the reality is streaming, I think, will produce a lot of potential for people to stay relevant far beyond their competitive careers. And I think you'll still have instances of pros that fall from the mansions to apartments or something, but they'll have much more stable sources of long-term income that I think hopefully will prevent some of the heartbreak stories you see in traditional sports.
This is a question, though. Do all pro esports players have successful streams? Because it's not the same medium. So to jump from one to the other could also be a failure. There is a potentially longer tail, but you could also be a really good pro player and a really crappy streamer, and it could not matter, and vice versa.
It's a great point, Lindsay. And I would argue potentially the numbers may mirror traditional sports exactly, right? The number of traditional like football guys who end up becoming broadcasters, maybe the same number or percentage of esports pros who become good streamers, right? What the other piece of context that I'm curious what you guys think is, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like esports in particular on the content side, and this is Cam makes a point here. FaZe Clan wants to prove otherwise. FaZe Clan's the perfect example, right? This is the kind of content that most esports, even up and coming pros, consume, right? It's the mansion, it's the Ferrari, it's the 100 Thieves compound. It's like this, so much of the gaming culture and content now seems to be around big purchases, very showy, crazy out there, big dollars, the gold chain, right? And I'm not saying traditional sports doesn't have that, but I feel like so much of the content on the gaming side is like that now. Does that have an impact here at all? I'm curious what you guys think there.
Well, those things are expensive, so yeah.
But maybe is esports worse than traditional sports in that sense?
Yeah.
Is the content more materialistic?
I mean, you could argue that they're on screen more, so it's like they're showing, like they have to actually show it, versus we don't always see like a traditional athlete when they go home, what they're doing, where they live, what they're driving. It seems like with gaming, there's more sharing, so maybe there's like some social element that you have to be keeping up with the Joneses. But yeah, I think the point that was made earlier, where it's like it's a natural distribution, where like there's you give a bunch of 18-year-olds a ton of money, like there's always going to be the fat tails where like one person decides to keep it all under their mattress and spend nothing, and like the other person like goes out and blows it in one night at a casino or something like that. So it's probably some element of that.
Martin says, of course we will see that. I agree, Martin. SJ says, yeah, I'm loving the predictions. A lot of them are genuinely very close. SJ, I don't know why you're surprised. Cam says FaZe Clan wants to prove otherwise. Career could almost grow post esports career. Yeah, for some, Cam, right? The ones that have, I think, the personality for streaming. Martin says it's what Paul said about personalities in esports. They have to get good at being in the spotlight to transfer into successful streamers. And you're, Martin, 100% right. And that's not true of everyone in the gaming space. No amount of money is going to buy a personality. Also true. Some of the best players are really pretty bad streamers, to be honest.
This is also why some pro athletes have become successful streamers in their post careers.
They have better personalities than.
I was just going to say, they weren't so good, but they're good on screen.
Yeah. Chad Johnson, Ocho Cinco.
My take on this, when William and I talked about it in the prep, we agreed that, especially I live in New York City, $2.2 million for a mansion is kind of hilarious. That buys you a studio apartment in the city.
I was going to say something.
Like,
that's nothing. Where is this, like Texas? It's got to be.
It's got to be somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Because he has 17 bedrooms.
I think it was Spain. In Spain.
Is it in Spain? Okay.
I think it was in Spain, but
it's in Texas.
Yeah.
Which is impressive because 2.2 million, like I said, in New York City.
With this, just one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say with this, I think it also really, I think natural distribution is a good way to put it, Jeff, but I think also it depends on the organization. Like I've talked to some organizations where, speaking of building personalities, they get youth coming into their training programs, or someone from another country who they come in and they don't know maybe about the online etiquette and how to conduct themselves. So they kind of train them about how to be exposed, right? They train them how to carry themselves. And I think with that could be how to act in their personal lives as well, because they're invested in them as a player and they're a reflection of the organization. So it's kind of like you could say the Yankees, right? They have to be clean shaven. I think the same thing is going to go for esports organizations as well, and how they want their players to reflect the companies.
You might get a tougher sell there, I think, with esports orgs, like telling people to shave their beards or things like that.
Can't do that. That's way more traditional sense, but more so in like the flash and,
Mm-hmm. The thing is, they encourage the flash, right? Like FaZe gives you a chain when you join FaZe, right? It's so part awesome. Of the welcoming package.
So great.
I should do that. I should do that with employees. I feel like that might be a thing.
Where's my Business of Esports?
Like a nice gold chain.
You offered me socks, and it could have been a chain.
You're all getting socks. Let's move on, guys. Let's talk about This was a big deal actually that happened, but I think there's an interesting sort of business conversation here. This is from digiday.com, and the headline is why Adidas treats esports deals like media partnerships, not sponsorship deals. And the article talks about specifically this new deal between Adidas and G2 Esports. But I think there's this fundamental sort of conversation to be had in terms of when you see these kinds of deals in the esports space, right? In traditional sports, I think it was very much about sponsorship, right? Adidas pays a certain amount of money to the team. The team puts the Adidas logo, right, on the jersey or on whatever the players are wearing. And that sort of is the extent of the partnership. Yes, they may do activations and things like that. But fundamentally, the crux of this article is when Adidas spends money with an esports team, they see it as an opportunity essentially to produce content. And through that is the advertising. Curious what you guys think about this phenomenon. I really do believe it is somewhat esports specific. But I do think it's a fact. Look, at Business of Esports, I think this is what we do. So I'm curious what you guys think of this.
I mean, I have a hot take, which is I think I think more and more sponsorships, including sports sponsorships, should be evaluated like media deals, right? Because I think really the subtext of that is it's like measurable returns and ROI, right? Like not airy things like impressions and brand halo, right? So I'm a bit like, yes, okay, maybe esports is more content driven, but also maybe this should be the standard that most deals are held to, right? Because in my mind, media deals are just better measured sponsorship deals.
Yeah, they
Go ahead,
have
Lindsay.
done some work like this, particularly with James Harden of the NBA, where when they created his shoe line, they did like a whole multimedia thing and, murals, and it was really cool. I actually hate James Harden, so I hated how cool.
Player feelings aside,
right? Well, it made me like him more actually, because it was just so well done. And Adidas was the first shoe company I'd seen do something that was a little bit different, and I can't describe exactly how it was different, other than they brought in more artists and more creatives and focused it like content rather than like an advertisement.
So they were producing original content that wasn't pure advertising.
No, and it was very art driven, which was really cool. So they, did a lot with like color and texture and interactive design. Also, it was awesome. Like it was so well done. It made me want the shoes. It was great. And so I'm really excited that they're doing this now with streamers, because the like interactivity option is so much higher. They could do some really cool activations in like AR. I would love to see an augmented reality ad that I can like download an app or something on my phone, or I don't know. There's a lot of ways that you can incorporate kind of gaming elements into this that I think would be really cool, and they have the backbone for it. So this could be awesome. I hope it is.
Victoria, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, to me, I look at this and I just see it as, yes, of course, they would want to smack their logo on their jerseys and any lifestyle apparel they're going to have as well. But I think companies like Adidas, these bigger companies, they're still trying to drive home that connection to the brand on a deeper level, and that it is more than just a logo on the jersey. I think they really want to show their true integration with the world of esports. And I think by co-creating content with these teams, that's probably what their goal is. And yeah, content is king, right? That's what people want. They want a lot of it. So I don't think they're going to lose anything by trying to develop more. And if they're both, game to do so, then it's great.
But do you see this, Victoria, as a broader marketing trend or something that's very much esports specific right now?
I think it's a broader marketing trend, like co-creation with the brands, and coming up with like one-off activations, things that are interactive, app releases, again, augmented reality, things like that. Anything new and exciting that's delivering content in a fresh way is, of course, definitely a broad new trend. But I think also on another layer specific to esports, they're really investing in that integration to drive home the marriage of the whole industry.
Jeff, were you going to say something?
No, I don't have much to add. I think everyone's points covered it.
my feelings on this are actually quite strong, which is I've always believed, and in fact, have been involved with other companies from an investor and even operational standpoint. I've always believed that the most effective marketing, the most effective, like getting the message to a potential customer or to a consumer, it's just far more effective when you deliver it wrapped in some kind of valuable content to that listener or to that consumer, because then it doesn't feel like you're being advertised to. You don't have this immediate knee-jerk reaction to skip or avoid or ignore or block or all the things people do to tune advertising out. And so if you hide advertising and you wrap it around sort of really interesting, valuable, entertaining kind of content, to me this is the best way to deliver advertising. And the fact that we're starting to see more of it in the esports space, I think, is a good thing. It shows a maturity. And Victoria, to your point, I agree, it's a broader trend. And it shows that the esports space specifically is borrowing those broader trends and maturing in that sense. But I'm always flabbergasted that I don't see more of this, right? Like, I'm always surprised that there isn't more just content creation wrapped around advertising or hiding like clever advertising underneath, because I do think it's massively effective.
Well, maybe it's there and you just don't know because it's so well.
Yeah.
If it's too well hidden,
you don't even know.
It's not doing the job, right?
Well, maybe you're buying things and you don't even know why.
Like,
because it was advertised to you so well. I'm just saying.
This is true. It could just be that clever. That is a possibility.
Paul, to your point of saying, it doesn't feel like you're being advertised to, I think that's just it, right? You're getting that balanced commitment from both sides where they're working on a project together. Like, it's not just Adidas comes in and says, wear this or show face in this. They're doing something together collaboratively, and it shows that they're just equally invested. I think it has a bigger impact, like you said. It feels more authentic, right? It requires the effort on both sides.
100% right. But I also think there's an interesting sort of collateral effect of this, which is I think brands really are no longer at least starting to see esports teams, for example, as teams or like sports teams at all of any kind. They're really starting to think about them as media companies, right?
Yeah.
And this is an interesting shift, one that I know the teams have been pushing for, because being an esports team is really hard. Being a media company is actually a whole lot easier. But the fact that that's the brands are buying into that, I think, is an interesting shift also. I'm guaranteeing.
What is? I understand like that trend, but what does that actually mean, right? The team becoming a media company versus just a team. Like, how is that different than what every professional sports team is doing?
I think sorry, go ahead, Victoria.
No, you're right. How is that different from every other sports team? I guess it's just they have the audience like other sports teams. They have the platform. You could argue, though, that it's reaching another demographic entirely. So traditional sports, they have their demographic, but now esports brands are seeing that as a unique opportunity to reach the younger demographic almost entirely, right? So
totally, I agree with all that. But I'm just saying this, we've heard this a lot, and every esports team seems to say, we're not a team, we're a media company. It's like, but what does that mean? Like, you have players, they participate in leagues, you create content, you sell it to, you sell advertising against it. It's like, okay, that's what every sporting organization does. Like, why are you all of a sudden a media company? Like, or
here's a question for you, Jeff.
Media companies, and this is just the new trend to call them that.
If
right? Like, how the Yankees are a media company, they literally own Yes Network. Like, how you can't get any more media company than that. So I just don't get it. Like,
but if we polled, I'm curious what you think. If we polled like 20 NFL teams or 20 Major League Baseball teams or whatever, and asked them, are you a sports team or are you a media company? What do you think they would answer? What do you think the majority would answer?
So they'd say a sports team, but I guess maybe it's because there's, in terms of valuation, you have esports teams, media companies, sports teams, right? So like, they don't want to be esports teams because esports teams valuations are here. They want to be media companies. But as soon as they get the media company valuation, they're going to say, oh no, we're traditional sports teams.
We're just like traditional sports team. Yeah.
And then eventually we're Disney.
We're Disney.
Yeah, they're Disney or Netflix. You get the
That's funny. They're just climbing the valuation ladder, is what you're saying.
And they're gonna eventually they're gonna become SPAC.
they all become SPACs in the end. They sell all their assets and they go back to being shells.
It's like Dragon Ball Z. It's like that's what it reminds me of. Like anyway.
Mark says not necessarily esports, but the company iBuyPower has had a ton of issues since the holiday season. Goes to show that businesses should avoid hitting max capacity or sacrificing long-term customers for short-term revenues. I mean, I agree, Mark. I don't think Adidas or any of the people we've been talking about are doing that here. I think that's true. Again, like you said, not necessarily esports specific. It's true for really any business. But you know, when you're in a high growth industry, and actually this is a good segue, when you're in a really high growth industry, sometimes those things are hard to foresee. Like those kinds of problems are good problems for iBuyPower. You understand the frustration as a customer, but as the company, it's a good problem to have when you're at max capacity. And that tends to happen in high growth industries. The reason it's a good segue is because the next article I wanted to talk about was about hardware. And this was an article from techthelead.com, which is a horrible name. 2020 was the biggest year for gaming hardware in almost a decade is the headline. And they talk about how gaming hardware has sold. They're referring to a lot here NPD data, again, the research and data organization NPD. In 2020, Nintendo's Switch was the best-selling gaming platform on both dollar sales and units sold. PS5 was number 2. And they said December 2020 consumer spending across video game hardware, content, and accessories reached a December record $7.7 billion, 25% higher when compared to a year ago. Full year spending also set a new record totaling $56.9 billion, 27% higher than 2019. $57 billion on game hardware, I think, is a really, really big number. It's a trend that William and I on the podcast have been saying you need to watch this trend basically since 2018, that hardware was going to be a major growth area. What do you guys think of the gaming hardware space? What do you think of the Nintendo Switch? Not even current generation console cycle outselling PlayStation 5, even though it's not really fair because PS5 just had the end of the year. But William, you were going to say something.
Well, there's something in the article you didn't read, which is also not only did the Switch sell crazily well, it had half of the best sellers. So
it's true.
Really strong correlation between platform density and then game, like actual, revenues for the games themselves, which I think is interesting. And you don't always see, by the way, particularly with Nintendo platforms. One of the criticisms of Nintendo historically has been, great system, and people buy one first-party title a year. So very interesting that has been addressed, at least in these numbers. I wish, first of all, I have to call out Mark Cochran with his amazing comment. Mark, thank you for buying my book. Next step, 5 stars on Amazon, please. It helps me out. It helps people discover the book. Okay, shameless shilling over. The reality is, I don't think there's a lot to add here other than,
what trend will we see in 2021 on the hardware side, William? That's an interesting sort of view on this, right? Will we see the Switch again anywhere in the top?
No.
Obviously, we're going to see it in the top 3. But will we see it challenging Xbox and PS5 this year, given that they will have a full year to sell? Or
let's let Jeff jump in. But no, it can't happen because of the console launch cycle. But maybe Jeff has some more.
The only conceivable way that would be possible is supply constraints. If Microsoft and Sony don't have enough consoles that they can sell and Switch continues to pump out whatever 25 million, then maybe that could be the case. But yeah, I mean, no would be, I think, the short answer. And just generally with this article, I mean, it's kind of one of these articles where maybe you would expect to see this on like a CNBC or something. Because to us, we're all sitting here probably like, why are you even talking about this? Is so obvious. Like, yes, gaming hardware sales are up, like pandemic, people playing more, consoles. you know, I like how they also say like the highest in nearly a decade, as if that's like impressive. It's like, well, guess when the last nearly a decade was the last consoles? Like, of course, like they make it seem like, wow, it was nearly a decade. Like, well, yeah, I bet 2013 or 2014 was the last year. Like, shocking. Sorry, I don't mean to shit on you as the moderator, Paul, but
No,
it's more.
It's so much better.
Like, this seems so obvious to us, like, because we just, you know.
I think what I like about this story again is there's trends. It may be obvious to us, but there are trends like these that get ignored in sort of the broader hype of like, oh my God, Fortnite, and oh my God, Among Us, and right, like, and the stuff that's less sexy, right, like hardware, tends to not be sort of front and center in terms of conversation. When in reality, right, if you look at sort of where a lot of growth and frankly absolute dollars are being driven, a lot of it is on hardware, right? It's people buying consoles and PCs and switches and God knows, like, and monitors and headsets and mice, and right, these are huge subsectors of the industry in and of themselves, and I find they don't get enough play. I think that's part of why I try and highlight these stories, because I do think there's still massive opportunity here, right? To me, this kind of growth doesn't slow down in 2021, even without a pandemic full year or whatever. Lindsay, go ahead.
Like hardware stocks? I mean, let's take it one step further. Would you be a buyer of Here or Corsair? Or like what? How do our viewers play this trend if we want to, you know, if they want to make some profit? Like
NVIDIA is like one of those that I wish I had bought. You know, like I've been buying NVIDIA GPUs pretty much my entire life, and I always buy the latest and greatest NVIDIA GPU. If I had half a brain cell, I would have bought a ton of NVIDIA stock, 10 years ago. I'm still massively bullish on NVIDIA, right? Like, to me, they're practically a monopoly in the GPU space. At the high end, they're basically unrivaled. Yes, AMD has some competition, but nowhere near the same driver support, partnerships in the industry, et cetera, embedded user base. They're in mobile. Now they bought ARM, like that transaction hopefully will close for them. I think it's still sort of being looked at, but like massively bullish on NVIDIA. Would I buy Corsair? I don't know. What are they trading at right now? But specifically Corsair, like all of these in general, unless they're at really crazy kind of valuations or, PE ratios or things like that, all of them in my view are pretty good buys right now. Just given, again, when you're talking about a space that may grow 30% plus year over year, it's sort of hard to be wrong, Like, it's not like people are going to stop buying Corsair. It's not like they will significantly underperform their peers. It's a well-run business. Like, would I buy Logitech? Yes, no question. Would I buy Corsair? Yes. Would I buy NVIDIA? Yes. Like, the really big players in the space are going to benefit from those broader industry trends.
Speaking of headsets, I was promised a headset, and
it's true. I have to send you one.
Did you lose my address, or?
Although you sound great, the mic is definitely an improvement.
The mic, we're good. I'm only messing with you.
Okay, I have to bring this back to my favorite point, which is that as internet gets better, we're only going to see more sales of this because we still have a large amount of people that are unconnected or not connected to high-speed internet. So that's only improving, and there'll be even more sales of devices and hardware. So I do think that the pandemic helped spur that too.
Let me ask you guys. You guys put me on the spot. What gaming hardware companies would you be watching?
It's hard not to say NVIDIA.
Intel has a new CEO. Do we think they're going to dig out of the hole they're in?
So good. Wait, which one? Which one did you say, Paul?
Intel has a new CEO. He came from VMware. Do we think they're going to dig themselves out of the big hole that they're in?
It's hard because so much of Intel's historic strategy was driven by the Intel Inside branding and a consumer drive. And I don't know how that carries forward now, right?
Well, like, AMD is beating them in the data center space.
Yeah.
AMD's beating them in the consumer space with better and cheaper offerings. And AMD now is starting to challenge them in the mobile space. They're not a big player yet, but the products are fundamentally superior to Intel's offerings. So are we worried about Intel's potential for the next,
Well, also, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't a lot of like the large phones and everything now going platform exclusive for their chips anyway, right?
Oh, very few are like Apple's going to start, I think, or already has started making their own modems. And I think that's all they were buying from Intel at this point.
Yeah.
And even then, I think they may, in the last round, they may have bought from Qualcomm, not from Intel.
I just
may
think
be
it's
wrong on
that I wouldn't short that business, but I don't know if I would buy it. That's one that maybe I'm less bullish on because it just seems like the business model there is shifting, right? Like it's a supplier driven model where the customers that you have much more capacity and incentive to choke. So I think that's less good. I don't know. I'm still a big fan of anything gaming peripheral related, like headsets, mice. Like I know it's ridiculous, and I know it seems like there's zero barriers to entry in that space. It's still a good space. There's still tons of demand. The reality is performance peripherals do actually correlate somewhat with performance, right? I don't know. I'm a big believer. I think we had our boom though for headsets with Turtle Beach, right? I think that the myth of the gamer headset being purpose built is a little bit overrated now. But other than headsets, I'm a fan of basically any other hardware. It's hard to go wrong betting on hardware because it literally indexes the space. Like that's what it is. Like you can't be strong on gaming and not be high on gaming hardware because you literally need it to play. So it's like a tough discussion to have because yeah, we can pick individual companies, but the reality is they'll all do well because gaming will do well, and hardware is the ticket required to ride, you know?
Yeah. It can be a little more cyclical though, right? And they're more durable. So you're not necessarily buying like multiple mice a year, but the general trend, has to be up.
So what would you look at, Jeff? Because you put me on the spot. I'm curious what you would be looking at.
Gaming hardware. I don't know. It's one of those things. I mean, Corsair, I think tells a good, and I'm not super close to the story, but I think when they came public, they told a pretty good story around, the tools that they had basically for streamers. So kind of like a one-stop shop where you can get, if you wanted to be a streamer, you can get everything you needed right there. And I think they even have like a little software product that you can use. Maybe even, did they buy? No, I was going to say they bought StreamYard, but that's not the case. But, similar, like
they bought Elgato.
Okay. That's what it was. So, like actual streaming tools. So I'd probably say Corsair, but I'm not super close to the story. So I wouldn't take that to the bank per se.
Just to sort of continue the conversation just a little bit on the hardware side, there was this sort of related article talking about, has Razer found a new way to reach profitability? And so they talk about
RGB
Razer.
Lights.
What's that, Lindsay?
With RGB lights.
Yeah. I think that is one way they are chasing it. But they talk about how, the market that they're in, obviously hardware is exploding, mirroring the other article. But specifically, they talk about how the peripheral and systems segment, where they're seeing a little bit of margin compression, right? Obviously more competition. And as a result, they're looking like their margins are being squeezed for laptops, mice, keyboards, and mouse mats specifically, where from 2015 to 2019, gross profit margin went from 31% to 20%. So a pretty, not insignificant drop in profit margins on those products specifically, or product categories. And what was interesting is the way they've grown their overall blended margin is by moving into other spaces like software services. They mentioned in this article specifically the Razer, what they call the Razer Youth Bank, which is essentially digital bank, targeted at gamers, obviously. And so I'm curious what you guys think about, these hardware manufacturers, and Razer here specifically, saw some margin compression over the last 5 years, but have, at least in Razer's case, have evolved outside of the gaming peripheral space. Will we see that from a Corsair? Will we see that from some of the other players, you think? Or does the space just get massively competitive and all these things just become commodities? Like what's the end game for gaming peripherals in your minds? Because they do build loyalty, right? That's the one thing the peripheral companies build. If you're a Razer fan and you love your Razer mouse, right, there is some loyalty there. William, I don't know what you're going to say.
Well, I'd rather answer it with sort of a different take on this, which is
sure.
like I wonder how necessary the margin compression on their hardware has been, right? Because if you look at Razer products, and this is me putting on my like CPG hat, like for example, they're incredibly overpackaged, right? Like literally, right? Like, and I know why they do that. It's the iPhone case phenomenon. They want you to feel like you're opening a luxury item. I would really wonder how many people today are purchasing Razer products at a Best Buy. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of these purchasers, I would expect so much of their purchase channel is digital, right? That other things matter, but not things like package. I think I wanted to call out here is like, I feel like there might be some engineering or product driven solutions to address this. And I suspect partly why they've had margin compression is I think other parties are delivering similar services on a more cost efficient basis and they're having to come down. And those other parties are doing cost reduction on their end that Razer hasn't necessarily matched. Its place of trying to stay ultra premium is tough when there's a lot of semi ultra premium, lower cost competition in the market. So I feel like they didn't need to take that one lying down. They could have adjusted, but that's
so if you're Razer, you would have cut down on your packaging. You would have gone more direct to consumer. Like, would that have been the play?
Ways to get the margin up, address channel, address product feature, address packaging. Candidly, I mean, I don't want to go into like a lesson of like back when I was in, the toy industry, right? But I can think of lots of different ways you can control it because fundamentally people are still buying the products, right? It's not a sales issue, it's a margin issue, right? And I generally believe that margin issues can be, again, barring specific example, margin issues can be addressed internal to the company.
Anyone else have thoughts on Razer before we move on?
I mean, I think
would you bank with Razer, Jeff?
Would I what with Razer?
Would you bank with Razer?
I wouldn't bank with Razer. I mean, it's almost like this is the natural evolution of hardware businesses. Almost every hardware business wants to be a software business. I mean, look at Apple, probably the most successful hardware business of all time. 90% of what they talk about now is services, Apple Music, subscriptions. It's just a better business model. So almost every hardware business wants to be a software business, and every software business wants to be a subscription business. That's just the way things are these days. And then they become a SPAC.
Speaking of becoming a SPAC, what do we think? Do we think Rob Gronkowski and Tfue will start a SPAC, an esports SPAC? This next article, this is just a silly one. Watch Rob Gronkowski, this is from Men's Health, go through a full workout with professional gamer Tfue. I bring it up only because, again, crossover between traditional sports and esports. It's like I don't know how long is this video, 12-minute video about Gronkowski, who's a football player, working out with Tfue, who is in extremely good shape himself. What is this? My question when I see these things is always, who is this better for? Is this better for football or is this better for gaming, like / esports? Like who wins in these kinds of collaborations, even in sort of situations where they're a little bit silly like this?
I think Gronk, this is just my guess. I think Gronk builds his audience more by doing this than Tfue does. I don't have any that's just my feeling.
That would be my belief too, is I don't think it's going to convert a lot of diehard 55-year-old football fans to follow Tfue's stream. But I suspect that what it will do is for Tfue fans who also watch football, this is now an affinity builder for Gronk. So I think, now that being said, you could argue the other way, it's content for Tfue, and Tfue's much more content sensitive and more in need of it. So I think they both win. But yeah, I think it's interesting that you're looking at a major crossover between E-Sports, as that magazine wrote, which I couldn't resist pointing out, and traditional sports. And you're actually starting to say, this is probably one of the first times discussing this topic where we're saying the traditional side had more to gain from the esports exposure than esports gained from the sports exposure.
Are any of you surprised? Sorry, Lindsay, just let me add this second question. Any of you surprised that in this 12-minute video, they also don't play any video games? It's literally them lifting weights.
A missed opportunity for them to do like DDR or Wii Fit or
zero
something.
video
like,
games.
Come on.
So they have Tfue, But all they do is lift weights and then play some game on the basketball court. They call, I don't know, they had a name for it. Some game.
Yeah, now I have to know.
Which I've played it before. Knockout, they called it. Knockout. I think we called it something different.
Did you honestly not remember what Knockout was called?
I never called it Knockout. I think we had a different name for it. I know the game, but I think we had a different name for it.
No, I was gonna say is I think that their personal brands win a lot more than either side. I mean, Gronk is a known personality, and for esports fans who like to follow different personalities, he's a great person to follow. He's funny, he's light, he's entertaining, and same thing with Gronk fans who might be more interested in. Ninja did a cooking show at one point. And it was hilarious. It actually made me like Ninja a lot more. And he's not someone that I would consider following, but I thought, oh, there's a bunch of people like me, like, you know, younger white women watching this cooking show, I'm sure. And he did fabulous. And I thought, oh, maybe they'll go follow him now.
So you have no issue that there was no gaming in this video? You don't think that was a miss?
No, it's on Gronk's channel, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it makes sense. I mean, I would love it if they had exchanged and Gronk did something on Tifu's channel. That would have been funny.
Yeah, but it would be like us inviting someone who's not in the gaming industry onto the podcast, but then not talking about the business of gaming. Right? Like,
yeah,
it'd be a little bit like
it's Gronk's show where he does his thing. So
that's true. Victoria, you were going to say something.
How did you know? Just the look on my face?
That's it.
I think it's good. I think it's good for both personal brands still. Am I surprised they didn't do gaming? No, I don't. I think it kind of would have been a little bit forced. I kind of like that they just worked out. I think that kind of seems kind of cool. They're just doing their thing together. They're not playing football. They're not gaming. They're both just working out. That's something they share in common. And that's really what they're trying to project. I saw this last week. It hasn't aired yet, but yes, I am in Toronto. I'm the Canadian here. And we have our Toronto Ultra, so our Call of Duty team guy, Methods, doing a video promotion with Mitch Marner from Toronto Maple Leafs. They literally just lost. I just checked the score. Probably could have guessed that, unfortunately. Anyways, but they did a crossover. So first they had Mitch Marner from the Leafs gaming with Methods. Awesome. People loved it. And then months and months later, there was like a sneak peek of it, and it's Methods all done up on the ice, ready to go. Mitch Marner's like tightening his helmet, and it was a sneak peek, and people are really pumped about it. You're getting the crossover of fans. Also, you say like that 55-year-old dad, is he going to go follow him? No, but he's like, maybe his son games, maybe his daughter games, and it's like, yeah, cool. I saw this. It's just further exposure and education. I see it as harmless. I think it's fun.
Jeff, I mean, you guys are doing a lot in the crossover space, right? Like you guys are working with a bunch of NFL teams and traditional sports teams and helping them sort of bring them into the esports world. So are you automatically a fan of this kind of crossover as a consequence?
I am. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little different. We're using the teams kind of as like marketing partners. And obviously the games we're going to be playing with those teams, at least to start, are going to be Madden, if it's an NFL team, if it's a soccer team, FIFA, NHL team, NHL, obviously. So I think there's a little more crossover when you talk about fan bases. Most of the fans of, say the Philadelphia Eagles, a lot of them are playing Madden. Just makes sense. So I think it's a little bit more of a natural, crossover. But yeah, I think anywhere where you can kind of blend the lines between traditional sports and esports, that's something that I think is a big trend. We are trying to capture on as well.
Guys, let's talk about, by the way, before we move on, I just want to say, for those of you who were on the live stream last week, we talked about Playtica. I just want to do a quick follow-up before we move on to the last big topic we're going to cover. You guys will be interested to see this, that on their first day of trading, the stock was up more than 30%. So if you were part of the live stream last week, we talked about both of these things. The big Playtica IPO, the $10 billion IPO, and the fact that we're seeing a lot of these IPOs surge on day one. And Playtica is yet another example of one of these happening, where the stock opened essentially 30% higher after day one than its initial pricing. So, interesting phenomenon continues. I don't think it's going to be the last. But another massively successful games developer going public at a huge valuation. So all very interesting things. I don't know if any of you had a comment, but we did talk about it last week.
There's another one going public, right? Huge Games with like a bunch of views they're going public in Poland.
Oh, really?
Same exchange as CD Projekt. It's a social casino company, so I don't, it's probably a couple billion valuation, but yeah.
Interesting. And you think we'll see the same thing, Jeff, there?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of the Warsaw exchange, how it relates. I don't know if they're seeing the same Robinhood effect that we are. But to your point, gaming is hot, so it'll probably do well, I'm sure.
Okay, I want to just finish on this last story, guys. And it's a Fortnite story, and it's 2 articles. So the first one is essentially sports.com, and the article here, it's total, I think, clickbait, but I love it. The headline: Fortnite faces flack as fast food workers apparently earn more than most pros. So this is the first headline. So we'll get to this in a second. The second headline was from The Verge, where Epic pledges $20 million for Fortnite esports in 2021. So I'm just curious, what was the date on this one? The 16th, and this one was the 19th. So I'm curious if someone at Epic saw this and said, "Hey, let's throw a few $1 million at this thing. We can't have news like this out there." My question to you guys is, first of all, I'm going to pat myself on the back. I wrote 2.5 years ago that Fortnite esports would probably not survive, would not be a vibrant competitive scene unless Epic was sort of propping it up with big prize dollars. And I've been proven spectacularly correct, especially if you believe this headline. But it seems Epic realizes this and is going to throw more dollars at this thing. What do you guys see as the future of Fortnite esports in this context? And because Epic needs to continue propping it up, it seems, with dollars, do you compare it unfavorably to something like a Valorant esports scene, which seems to have grown very much organically without the need for big dollars to prop it up?
Well, first of all, is Dota propped up because it has like a $30 million prizing? Like, the reality is
the money, though, that $30 million is not coming from Valve.
Yeah, well, you could argue that it sort of is, right? Like
it's one pocket.
Dota could have pocketed that money. Instead, they chose to share it into the prize pool. But the bigger thing is, like, why should it be a surprise that there needs to be support from the publisher for a competitive scene and financial rewards for success? Like, of course, those are necessary ingredients to the success of any competitive scene, right? And I take your point, Paul, and I agree that there might be some elements of Fortnite and maybe how it's designed that make publisher activations and investment more important for this game. But it's important for every game, and it all comes from somewhere. And a lot of times it's coming out of the publisher's pocket and you're not realizing it, just like the Valve Invitational thing we just talked about. I think it's totally reasonable. I think it's very exciting for a lot of players who are passionate about Fortnite. And let's not forget, it's still a huge game. This is the best news ever. Like, this is like your dream. The game that you love is going back into the marquee spotlight, right? And I also think, candidly, this is a little bit of a good tact for Epic to be taking, given the challenges it's had with distribution on apps right now, right? Like, they need other ways to drive engagement in the game. Esports is a good engagement driver.
So, William, you think you think that I was not correct about Fortnite esports?
I think that you were correct that there needs to be rewards for competitive play and publisher support.
No. Yeah. You think Fortnite has a vibrant esports scene right now, is what you're saying?
I think you will be surprised at how successful the Fortnite scene becomes based on this announcement.
If you listen to the pros right now, they have all completely turned on Fortnite, right? There's a reason an article like this comes out where they say Fortnite faces flack as fast food workers apparently earn more than them. It's because you have huge streamers and pros like Nick A30, who's come out and said basically Fortnite competitive esports are dead. Like, there's not even any point to play it anymore. And I don't think this is an anomaly. I don't think this is one person. right? The competitive scene never had any chance of success. It was momentarily propped up by big prize dollars. They will get a little blip because of the big prize dollars here, but I think fundamentally the scene doesn't stand a chance. And I think it's a lesson going forward, which is successful esports scenes, if you want them to work, the game has to be designed for it, which Fortnite was not. Valorant very much is, League very much is, right? And second, you need to let that scene grow organically. And I think I didn't appreciate this about Valorant completely, but they didn't sort of ram it down people's throats. It wasn't like Valorant esports and $20 million and right to like they let it sort of fester and grow and happen sort of behind the scenes. And I think very much organically now, as a consequence, has a base that you can't buy. Like Epic can't even buy that for Fortnite anymore.
With that being said, I mean, the growth, them not growing organically, I mean, they're still probably considered the pioneer of the free-to-play Fortnite, right? So, I mean, back then you could have looked at it like, okay, that's pretty organic of them to make it a free game when that was so new. I mean, I think Epic's just, this is their strategy, right? Are they going to throw more money into the prize pool? Or are they going to realize that a lot of people are saying their game has an expiration date and they're going to start trying to figure out, okay, what's our next game? How are we going to keep our fan base? I mean, this is the strategy they chose. And yeah, I mean, I think they're a vibrant game. I think they still have some time left personally.
Oh, no question. The game's not going anywhere. The question is, what does the competitive scene look like? And has it become, and what I believe it's always been, a marketing expense for Epic, not a profit center for Epic, not a genuine business that they want to build out for the long. This is marketing dollars to push more people to play the game, fundamentally, is how I believe.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, I think your point was always correct. I mean, Fortnite was not built to be a high skill cap competitive game. It's a casual game. It's, to use the M word, they're building it to be a metaverse, to be casual, to have a place where people can hang out. It's not supposed to be League of Legends or, a high Valorant where people are coming in and competing to be the best. Part of it is that mass casual audience. So I don't, I think they're kind of trying to have one foot in, one foot out. Hey, let's try to build this esports scene just because, like you said, it can be a useful marketing expense and help engagement a little bit. But I think from the core of the game, the way it's built, it was never built to be an esports, ready game. So I think you're
CEO of Epic. You're Tim Sweeney. Is $20 million, is this what you throw at this? Is this too much, too little, not enough? Like, I'm curious if you're in his shoes right now. And first of all, he's completely distracted with the Apple thing. There was other news this week where, they're trying to file lawsuits in the UK to get, Apple to free Fortnite. Like, they're so busy fighting this Apple fight. Is this the right play for Fortnite, right?
Without knowing all their resources and what their, how much they actually have to spend and where they're allocating it, it seems like, it's probably the right amount in the sense that I don't think it's very much for the company. I think where they should really be spending their money is trying to build that metaverse, creating more user-generated content, concerts. I mean, we talked about, I don't know if it was them or if it was Roblox. They got the investment from Warner Music. I think it was Roblox. That's what they should be doing. They should be paying performers to perform in, concerts, movies. You can meet your friends and quote unquote go to the movies in Fortnite. That's the kind of experiences they should be building, not necessarily in a high competitive esports scene. They already lost that battle. They lost that battle when they built the game, frankly, just the way they built it.
Agreed. Mark says, what is the player base for Fortnite now? I see more children playing it. I mean, it's always trended younger. I don't know if I'd go so far as like children, and the player base is still very large. Like we're talking, I don't know what it currently is at, but for sure, tens and tens of millions of players, if not more. It's in slow decline though, right? Like it's not cratering, but it's in slow decline. You also ask, which is more important for the success of a game as an esports, solid salaries or high prize pools? A great question. Curious, what do you guys think of the two?
I need a mix.
Depends on the game. Like,
Well,
I think it's too hard to pick just one. I mean, there's so many factors that go into what makes it successful that I think it's hard to say, like, oh, a salaried team will work better because you have, I mean, League of Legends, but you also have OWL, where that's clearly not going well. And, you know, Dota's really successful with high prize pools, but obviously the Fortnite World Cup kind of fizzled out, and that had a pretty big prize pool. So I think it's completely dependent on.
So no question that neither guarantees success. But if we had to rank which one, to Mark's question, which one's more important in general, is there any thoughts on that?
For esports, it's probably the high prize pool, honestly, because there's other ways players can replace the stability of income of a salary, like streaming. But the high prize pool is the marquee media coverage, fantasy moment. I'm going to Disney World, just won 25 million, right? Like that counts for a lot, because everybody who imagines themselves a pro imagines themselves winning, right? Nobody imagines themselves getting 8th place. So I would say the prizing.
It's interesting. My like first thing is I 100% agree. I think it's the prize money, and also like for the viewership that it brings in and the hype that it builds around the event. And then I was just thinking back to our comparison to traditional sports, right? And I'm thinking like that's all just high salaries, no prize money, and that's what like traditionally people have enjoyed and success has been built upon. So it's really interesting for us to now sit here and say, yeah, no, we need the big prizes. Like that's what success is. It's interesting.
I mean, it's a fascinating insight, right? Because it's not really like widespread information. Like no one says, oh my God, they're going to win the Super Bowl and each guy's going to get like $3 million, right? Like no one, oh, there's a 50 million prize pool for the Super Bowl. Like that's not part of the conversation. And it's a fascinating insight. Like why does that work for traditional sports? But William, to your point, and I think I agree with you, esports seems to need that sort of big number.
It's a stand-in for legitimacy. It's because everybody knows if you win the Super Bowl, you're doing well, right? Like if I told my mom I won the Dota Invitational, she might not know what that means. But if I said I got 30 million, she'd understand.
Good job. I'm so proud.
Lindsay, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with all of that. I just wonder which one leads to a sustained scene more. Because like I said, Fortnite had the big prize pools and a game that was very familiar to a lot of people, and it fizzled. And there's other problems. Obviously, the game wasn't built for it, all that stuff. But Dota's been able to sustain a lot of success on offering a big prize pool. League's gone a different way. There's so many things to be considered, and I think like we're so early on in what could and couldn't be successful that I think it's way too early to say like, oh, we need the big prize moment. Maybe we don't. Maybe tomorrow some game comes out, everybody falls in love with it, and nobody is thinking about the money. They're only thinking about who's best. It's true. It's hard to pick those long-term factors.
And it may change and evolve long-term, to your point, right? The same way I think like big salaries don't really work today fundamentally because most of the teams are struggling to monetize, right? So when you have businesses that are already struggling to monetize and then you sort of saddle them with huge salaries, right? You kind of have a recipe for failure. So like your point's a good one in that today, maybe the big salaries don't work, but maybe long-term that is the more important sort of piece of the puzzle. That's
also why you see the big prize pools, because who pays the prize pools? The publishers, who actually make money, and they view it as a marketing expense, because you could almost make an argument that the public, we don't know what the right answer is necessarily, but we know what the publishers think the right answer is, because they've all kind of gone one direction. Maybe that's just because that's the easier way. I guess Activision, you could argue, did sort of go with the stable salary approach. But it seems like most of the publishers, you create a new game. Hey, let's put $10 million into an esports event. You saw it with Apex Legends. You've seen it with, a whole number of games. Fortnite, clearly. So.
Cam says, definitely on the right track. CDL announced 5 million. Hope to see a lot more advertising as well. Watching game, more content than just tourney streams, etc. I mean, look, the big prize money attracts the attention. There's no question. And it's fun as a viewer to know that they're playing for big dollars, right? It's definitely more interesting than knowing the winner after all this is going to take home like $20. is a lot more exciting. Mark says nearly every boy in my wife's second grade class plays. Yeah, Mark, no question, it's massively popular with the younger crowd. And I've said many times, the example I always give is ask any 13-year-old if they'd rather play Fortnite or play soccer. The large majority are going to say Fortnite, and this is why it's still the huge sort of behemoth that it is. Francois says having a strong amateur scene is super important. Francois, and I'm sure you guys agree, but I think this is where League does it very well. I'm curious what you guys think about that, but I think League has done the amateur space, and they've recently announced as part of their sort of overhaul and their new sort of logo and everything, even more emphasis on the amateur scene and amateurs who want to sort of get to pro, the path, sort of what Overwatch called the path to pro, that I think League has probably done better than anyone else. But curious if you guys have thoughts on that specifically. If not, I can just keep going. Mark says, oh, so Cloud9 paying G2 $12 million for one player maybe wasn't the best idea. No, it was not. Even though Cloud9, I'm sure, can afford it, they're still burning investor cash right now. And in fact, did you guys see this? That one of the players that they signed to a big contract, one of the CSGO players that they signed to a multi-million-dollar contract, actually, they just let him go. And so that's already kind of backfired on them. I can't remember his name now. He's their opper. I think he's like one of the big stars that they actually already let go, which is not a good look for Cloud9. LinkedIn users.
It's the most bold move ever. We just spent $12 million. We don't even need the guy.
I think the rumor was they fired him because he didn't want to move somewhere with a better ping, I think. And he was struggling to play like on maybe William, you can look it up quickly, but like
that's like ridiculous. That's so unprofessional if that's true. Like you have to, that would be like, you know, getting fired from your job in the NBA because you didn't want to relocate to your team's practice facility, you know?
Well, you might for that. I mean, you might. LinkedIn user says, agree. LinkedIn user, please tell us your name. Agree regarding team salaries. Will team jobs, I don't know, what's that?
Jobin
be dominant. Who's Team Jobin? Am I the only one who doesn't know this? Will Team Jobin be dominant in 2021? I don't know if you guys know who this is. Who's Team Jobin? Let's see. I don't know. I've never heard of this.
I think you just answered the question.
So the fact that I don't know who Team Jobin is, and no one here does, probably not, but they may have an ace up their sleeve. I mean, anything's possible. Martin says, take home $20, cough Nintendo. I look, Martin, when I won the LAN, I played in the Apex LAN here in New York. I took home like $100 and I was very proud to have taken it home. So, you know, $20 better than nothing, if you ask me. Guys, anything else we wanted to talk about? If you guys are watching, anything else you wanted us to touch on this week? If not, I want to quickly do, because we haven't done it. We didn't do it last week, and I felt bad. We got to do, what are we playing this week? Everyone's favorite sort of end of show segment. William?
I don't have a good answer. I haven't been playing anything. It sucks. Like, I guess I'll say Heroes of the Storm because I do still sneak in a game or two of that. But yeah, I this is a Lindsay Poss moment where I don't have it. No, I'm kidding.
Please,
I'm kidding,
Lindsay and Victoria, please tell us. Jeff, I've given up on.
Yeah, I mean, I had a kid like 48 hours ago. So.
Finally,
excuses.
Yeah, what's your kid playing, Jeff? What's he playing?
He's playing like try to stay alive, eat, sleep, and poop, and he's doing a good job at that so far. He's excelling.
Sounds
he's
like
way ahead of
Blizzard's latest mobile blockbuster. Lindsay, Victoria, please tell us. You guys are playing. Like, save this whole segment, please. No.
Sorry, this week
I am.
you can save it. You can save it. This is back to school time for me, so I'm lucky if I can just get some sleep.
Victoria,
Hopefully
you are
by
going to
next
be
week.
a regular on the live stream, I hope. But I didn't give you a chance at the beginning. For anyone who's watching and for people who end up watching this after the fact as a VOD, like how can people find you? Just give them sort of the 2 minutes on what you're up to.
I'll give you less than 2 minutes. I'll give you a quick overview. So I'm Victoria Taylor. I'm calling in from downtown Toronto. I think I'm the only Canadian on the show.
Technically,
cool.
no, but the only one living in Canada.
Paul's Canadian.
Yes. Correctly.
I always forget that. Amazing.
We're
Okay.
sneaky.
Language.
So I think I was already introduced as the third prof on the show. I'm a marketing professor and I work at Seneca College here in Toronto. And I am the head of our new esports marketing program that we just launched this semester. Super awesome. It's a 1-year grad certificate giving students the opportunity to learn about the world of esports with a focus on business and marketing. So we want them to graduate, with that real experience and be first in the marketing talent pipeline for esports. So if anybody watching or listening is interested in an education in esports, even if you are not physically here in Toronto, you can still hit me up. You can go to Seneca Esports and you can do the program even online.
You can take Victoria's class. You can take William's class. You can take my class. Lindsay and Jeff, when are you going to have classes that they can take?
Jeff's
they say use his kid as an excuse
This
again.
is big. I did it.
They say those who can't do teach. So I'm trying to focus on doing.
And those who can't teach esports.
This is good. Martin at least is playing something. He's playing chess. This is what the gaming industry.
Oh.
Specifically played something so I could talk about it.
This is what the esports industry has come to. Now it's all about chess. In fact, I was watching chess streams today while I was working, so I'm also guilty of this. They're highly entertaining.
Really?
On that, yeah, very, very entertaining.
So I don't even get to talk about what I specifically played for this segment.
Yes, I thought you said you had nothing.
No, I said I have something.
See, I'll even put this back up.
Last week when I couldn't play Untitled Goose Game because I clipped a
Go
nerve
ahead.
in my finger with scissors. I don't know. Don't ask.
Lindsay, you're saving this whole segment. What did you play?
It was every bit as fun as I suspected it would be. That's
You
all.
played what?
Untitled Goose Game.
Okay, give us the 10-second review here.
Untitled Goose Game was great. You get to be a little goose. You wander around a village. You annoy people and you steal things. Right up my alley.
This is what gaming has come to. Chess and Untitled Goose Game.
Give it a try. It's very fun.
At least
it's going to be bigger than Roblox in 2 years. Just watch.
Are we betting? Is Jeff taking that bet?
It's going to be bigger than Twitter.
On that
I can't
note,
wait to be right on that. I will talk about that every live stream. Every quarter we can have a chart that shows the trajectory.
The worst bet in all of esports.
Victoria, let's ask Victoria. We had to ask every single person.
Go ahead. Ask the question.
You asked. You're better at it. I forgot.
Okay. Very simple. Jeff and I have a bet that in the next, we said 2 years, right? 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That if you compare the daily active users of Roblox and the daily active users of Twitter, which one will be larger? Jeff says Twitter. I say Roblox.
Ooh. Gonna have to go Twitter.
Team wrong. That's
Well,
okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for joining us.
It's okay. It's okay.
You shouldn't have told me who voted for what.
Why did that bias your? That's
It didn't.
That biased your opinion.
She just has heard me on here and is like, wait, that guy actually is right. Every time.
Right.
Yeah.
Look, I talk about esports betting, especially on the podcast, especially in the context of EEG. You want the worst bet in gaming, betting against the profit. All right. And on that note, stay tuned tomorrow for the podcast. It'll drop tomorrow, guys. My weekly minutes, as always, come out on Mondays and Tuesdays. Listen to those. They're a lot of fun. It's the sort of top 3 stories. And every Wednesday evening, we do this live stream. So if you're lurking, if you're watching this as a VOD, tell your friends, come back every week, participate. We know like literally only about 1% of the viewers ask questions and participate. So we really encourage it, and we love the folks, Mark, Cam, Martin, all you guys that are here, Francois, all you guys, SJ Cryptic, that participated today, Neil. We really appreciate it. We love you guys for it. And on that note, guys, that wraps up this week's live stream, and we will see you guys next week.